My family called me a burden and disowned me at Christmas, so when they returned to seize my inheritance, I made them face their downfall. The signs were always there. Every year, my relationship with my family deteriorated. They only spoke to me when they needed something: money, errands, favors. If I helped, I barely got a thank you. If I didn't, they acted like I was a selfish freeloader. My parents constantly reminded me that I was still living in their house, and in their eyes, that meant I owed them. It didn't matter that I had a full-time job. It didn't matter that my brother Tyler and his wife Emily also lived there, rent-free, doing nothing. Somehow, I was the burden. Tyler and Emily were always on my parents' side. They had to be. They had no money, no jobs, and no plans to change that. They were perfectly happy living off my parents, so of course they agreed with everything they said. My parents acted like I was the world's biggest disappointment just because I wouldn't hand over my paycheck every time they asked for it. I guess they finally had enough of me because a few days before Christmas, everything exploded. I came home from work and walked into the living room. They were all sitting there waiting for me. Mom, Dad, Tyler, Emily. I knew that look. It was never good. Mom spoke first. "Ethan, we need to have a serious talk." I didn't say anything, I just sat down and waited. Dad took over. "We've been thinking, and we don't want you here anymore." Just like that, no hesitation, no sugarcoating. "We want to start the new year without you," Mom added. "It's time for you to move out." "You're an adult," Dad said. "It's not right for you to keep living here and not helping us when we need you." It was a joke. I did help. I paid for groceries sometimes. I paid bills when I could. But I wasn't their personal banker, and that was the problem. I looked at Tyler and Emily. They weren't even pretending to look sad about it. That's when it hit me. They wanted my room. I knew they were planning on having kids soon, and I guess they figured they needed the space. Mom kept talking. "We've given you a home for 23 years. You've had more than enough time to get on your feet. It's time for you to be on your own." "Okay," I said. That made them angry. Mom's face twisted. "That's all you have to say?" Dad leaned forward. "We tell you we don't want to see you, and you don't even care?" I shrugged. "You've already made up your mind. What do you expect me to do? Beg?" They didn't like that answer, but I wasn't going to fight them. What was the point? They had decided I was a burden, and no amount of arguing was going to change that. Dad stood up then. "Pack your things and leave." So I did. I went upstairs, packed a suitcase, grabbed my laptop, and filled a couple of bags with my stuff. No one offered to help. No one even looked. They just stayed downstairs, probably already talking about how nice it would be to have me gone. The next morning, I left. No goodbyes, no last-minute doubts from them, just me walking out the door for the last time. I went to my Uncle Richard's house. He and my grandmother were the only ones who ever really cared about me. The moment I called him, he told me to come over, no hesitation. That night, as my parents, Tyler and Emily, celebrated Christmas without me for the first time in my life, my uncle and grandmother sat at the table with me. "You know they're terrible people, right?" Uncle Richard said. "You're better off without them." Grandma nodded. "They don't deserve you." I wanted to believe them, I really did. But after 23 years, it was hard not to feel that maybe, just maybe, my own family was right about me. Little did I know that in 3 months, everything would change. Living with Uncle Richard and Grandma was the complete opposite of what I was used to. For the first time in my life, I wasn't walking on eggshells. There was no one making me feel like a burden, no passive-aggressive comments about how I wasn't doing enough, no one demanding my money. It felt strange, almost too easy. At first, I kept waiting for the catch. Maybe Uncle Richard would get annoyed with me. Maybe Grandma would hint that I needed to pay rent. But it never happened. If anything, they went out of their way to make sure I felt at home. Uncle Richard would joke that the house was big enough for both of us and that, unlike my parents, he didn't expect me to support him. Grandma cooked my favorite meals and reminded me, every time she saw me looking lost, that I wasn't the problem. They were. "I should have fought harder for you," she once told me. "I used to make excuses for your parents, but I can't anymore. They've shown who they really are." Hearing that from her was both comforting and painful. I had spent years telling myself that maybe I was the problem, that maybe if I had been more helpful, if I had given them more money, they would have loved me the way a family should. But Grandma's words stayed with me. 3 months passed, I was doing well. I had a steady job, was starting to save money, and for the first time I could breathe without the constant weight of guilt weighing me down. Just when I thought life was finally settling into something good, everything changed again. Grandma got sick. It happened so fast it didn't feel real. One day she was fine, laughing, cooking, telling stories. The next, she was in the hospital, looking smaller and weaker than I had ever seen her. Uncle Richard and I spent every day by her side, but it didn't matter. Within 2 weeks, she was gone, just like that. The funeral was small, just close family and a few of her old friends. My parents didn't come. Tyler and Emily didn't even send a text. I shouldn't have been surprised, but I was. Losing her was a different kind of pain. She was one of the only people who had ever been on my side, who had truly loved me, and now she was gone. After the funeral, I just tried to focus on getting through each day. I thought that was the worst of it. I thought life would get back to normal. Then we got a call from Grandma's lawyer. Uncle Richard and I went to his office a few days later, expecting it to be a simple reading of her will. I wasn't expecting much, maybe some of her belongings, a letter, something sentimental. But as the lawyer began to go through her estate, I felt as if the rug had been pulled out from under me. Grandma had left me everything, her entire life savings, $500,000. I couldn't even process it at first. I sat there staring at the papers, waiting for someone to tell me it was a mistake. But it wasn't. Uncle Richard just grinned and patted me on the back. She always said she wanted to make sure you were taken care of. $500,000. It was more money than I had ever seen in my life. I didn't know what I was going to do with it, but one thing was clear. I was finally free. I could get my own place, start fresh, build a life without my parents' voices in the back of my head telling me I was a disappointment. And then my parents found out. That's when the war started. At first, I didn't tell anyone about the inheritance. Uncle Richard knew, of course, but he told me to keep quiet for a while. Give yourself time to think, he said. Once people find out, they're going to come crawling. He was right, but I didn't expect how bad it would get. Somehow, maybe through a distant relative, maybe from snooping, my parents found out. The moment they did, they came running. I was at work when I got the first call from my mother. I ignored it. Then another, then another. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. By the time I went on break, I had over a dozen missed calls and a flood of texts. Mom, Ethan, we need to talk. Dad, call me back now. Mom, we just heard about Grandma's will. I can't believe you didn't tell us. We're family. Tyler, bro, WTF, call Mom before she loses it. I stared at the messages, my stomach twisting. I should have blocked them right then and there, but part of me wanted to hear what they had to say. So, like an idiot, I called back. The second my mom picked up, she wasn't even pretending to be calm. How dare you keep this from us? She snapped. We're your family, Ethan. You should have come to us first. Why? I asked, genuinely curious. It's my inheritance. Mom scoffed. You think you deserve all that money after everything we've done for you? Everything they had done for me? I almost laughed. Dad took the phone, then you need to come home. We need to discuss this as a family. I knew what that meant. They wanted me to hand over the money. No, I said. There was a long silence before Dad spoke again, his voice lower, angrier. Excuse me? I said no. I'm not coming over. You owe us! Mom shrieked. We raised you. We let you live under our roof for 23 years. You wouldn't have anything, if it weren't for us. I felt something snap inside me. The same argument, the same guilt-tripping, the same manipulation. I was done. Then consider us even, I said. You gave me a roof. I gave you my childhood. And I hung up. I thought that would be the end of it. I thought they would scream about it to each other, maybe send a few more angry texts, and eventually give up. I underestimated them, because the next day, they showed up at Uncle Richard's house. I was in my room when I heard the pounding at the door, then shouting, Uncle Richard yelling back. I rushed downstairs just as he swung the door open to reveal my parents and Tyler standing on the porch. Mom's eyes were red like she'd been crying, or forcing herself to cry. Ethan, she said, we just want to talk. No, you don't, Uncle Richard cut in, you want money. Dad ignored him and stepped forward, looking straight at me. We're struggling, Ethan. Your mother and I are drowning in bills. Tyler and Emily are trying to start a family, and you're sitting on $500,000 while we suffer. Tyler, standing behind him, crossed his arms. Dude, don't be selfish. You have more than you need. I almost laughed. More than I needed? After years of them treating me like an ATM, suddenly I was the selfish one? You didn't even come to Grandma's funeral, I said. And now you're here asking for her money? Mom wiped at her eyes. We didn't think it would turn out like this. We thought she'd divide it equally. We thought she'd be fair. I looked her dead in the eyes. She was fair. That's when everything exploded. Mom started screaming about how I was ungrateful, how I was tearing the family apart. Dad threatened to take legal action, said I owed them something for all the years they raised me. Tyler muttered that I was being a prick and should just help out like a real man. Through it all, Uncle Richard stood beside me, arms crossed, not saying a word until finally, he sighed and stepped forward. Listen, you leeches, he said, voice calm but firm. Ethan doesn't owe you a damn thing. Now get the hell off my porch before I call the cops. For a second, no one moved. Then Dad clenched his jaw, grabbed Mom by the arm, and stormed off. Tyler shot me a glare before following. As they drove away, Uncle Richard turned to me and patted my shoulder. You know they're not done, right? I did. And I was right because a few days later, I found out they were trying to contest the will. The war wasn't over, it was just beginning. I should have known they wouldn't give up that easily. My parents had spent years trying to control me, first with guilt, then with anger. Now they were trying something new, legal threats. It started with an email from a lawyer I'd never heard of. Subject, regarding your grandmother's estate. Dear Ethan, I represent your parents in a legal matter concerning the recent inheritance left to you by your grandmother. They believe that the division of assets was unjust and that, as her direct children, they are entitled to a portion of her estate. We would like to resolve this amicably. Please contact us at your earliest convenience to discuss a fair distribution of funds. Fair? I stared at the email, barely able to believe what I was reading. These people had disowned me, thrown me out like garbage, and now they wanted her money. Uncle Richard wasn't surprised when I showed him. He just laughed. Vultures, he called them. What do we do, I asked. We ignore them, he said. They don't have a case. He was right. My grandmother's will was airtight. She had chosen to leave me everything. There was no mistake, no loophole. But my parents didn't care about that. A few days later, the lawyer emailed me again, this time with a threat. If you do not respond, we will be forced to take legal action to reclaim the portion of the estate that rightfully belongs to your parents. I was done playing nice. I replied, there is nothing to reclaim. The will is legal and final. If you continue to harass me, I will take legal action for harassment. I didn't expect a response, but instead of an email, I got something worse, a lawsuit. They were actually suing me. The moment Uncle Richard saw the papers, he burst out laughing. Idiots, he said. They're wasting their money. I wasn't so sure. I'd never been in a courtroom before. I didn't know how these things worked. What if they win? I asked. They won't, he said, but we're going to make sure this bites them. That's when Uncle Richard did something I didn't expect. He called his own lawyer, a real lawyer, one who actually knew what he was doing. Let's make them regret this, he said, and that's exactly what we did. The first court date was a disaster for them. Their lawyer argued that my grandmother had been mentally unfit when she wrote the will, that she had been manipulated by me and Uncle Richard. But my grandmother had written the will years ago, long before she had even gotten sick. We had documents proving that she was of sound mind when she made her decision. Strike one. Then they tried to argue that my parents deserved a share because they were her children. The judge shut that down fast. Deserving doesn't mean entitled. Strike two. Then came the best part, when we revealed something they hadn't expected. See, my grandmother had left something for my parents, a letter. Not money, not property, just a letter explaining exactly why they weren't getting a cent. And we had the judge read it aloud in court. To my son and his wife, if you are reading this, it means you are fighting for something that was never yours to begin with. I have watched how you treated Ethan his entire life. I have seen the way you used him, belittled him, and discarded him when he was no longer useful to you. You have been selfish, cruel, and undeserving of anything I could give. That is why I leave you nothing. This money belongs to Ethan, not because of luck, not because of favoritism, but because he is the only one who has shown kindness, integrity, and strength in the face of your mistreatment. He deserves a fresh start. You do not. Let this be my final lesson to you. You reap what you sow. When the judge finished reading, my parents sat there in stunned silence. Tyler looked like he wanted to sink into the floor. Strike three. Case dismissed. I won. And just like that, my parents' last chance to get their hands on my money disappeared. But they weren't done yet. No, after losing in court, they went for something even lower. They went after my job. The courtroom victory should have marked the final chapter of this nightmare. Any reasonable person, after being thoroughly defeated by the legal system, would have recognized when to retreat and accept their loss with whatever dignity remained. But expecting rationality from my parents at this point would have been foolish on my part. They had already demonstrated time and again that desperation had eroded whatever sense they once possessed. Their obsession with the inheritance had consumed them entirely, transforming them into people willing to cross any line, abandon any principle, just to get what they believed they were owed. 7 days after the judge's gavel came down and dismissed their baseless lawsuit, my phone rang at work. The caller ID showed my manager's extension. My stomach immediately tightened with an inexplicable sense of dread. Ethan, we need to talk, his voice came through, lacking its usual warmth. Can you come to my office? The walk down the hallway felt longer than usual, each step heavy with apprehension. As I entered and saw his expression, the knot in my stomach twisted tighter. Something was definitely wrong. He sat rigidly behind his desk, shoulders tense, hands clasped together in that particular way people do when they're about to deliver uncomfortable news. The atmosphere in the room felt thick, suffocating. We've been getting some concerning reports about you, he began carefully, his eyes searching mine. My heart sank even as my mind raced ahead, already connecting the dots, already knowing where this was heading. What kind of reports? I asked, though I could already feel the answer forming in the air between us. He paused, clearly uncomfortable, choosing his words with deliberate caution. Anonymous complaints. Multiple ones, actually. They're claiming you've been involved in fraudulent activities, specifically that you manipulated your grandmother, coerced her, influenced her improperly, into changing her will and leaving everything to you. The words hung in the air like an accusation, and in that moment, I understood just how far my parents were willing to go to destroy me. I almost laughed. Let me guess. My parents called. He didn't confirm it, but he didn't have to. Look, Ethan, I don't believe it, he said quickly, but HR has to investigate when we get reports like this. I sat there trying not to lose it. They had lost in court, lost every attempt to take what was mine, and now they were trying to get me fired. I'll cooperate, I said, keeping my voice steady. But I hope you know this is all lies. He nodded. I figured. Just sit tight while we clear it up. It took a week, but eventually HR confirmed there was zero evidence of fraud or manipulation. My job was safe, but my patience was gone. That was the last straw. I had tried everything, ignoring them, standing up to them, fighting them in court, and they still wouldn't stop. I knew one thing: as long as they thought they had a chance of squeezing money out of me, they would never leave me alone. So I decided to make sure they never tried it again. I knew a few guys, not criminals, just people who knew how to handle situations like this. People who could be persuasive. I made some calls, paid a reasonable amount, and let them handle the rest. 2 days later, I got a text from one of them. It's done. They won't bother you again. Later, I heard what happened. A group of guys showed up at my parents' house late in the evening. They didn't break in, they didn't hurt anyone. They just talked, firmly. They told my parents, in no uncertain terms, that if they ever tried to interfere in my life again, if they ever called me, harassed me, or pulled another stunt like the lawsuit, there would be consequences. They didn't say what kind. They didn't need to. The message was clear. Tyler was home when it happened. I heard he just stood there, silent, while my parents stammered and nodded, too terrified to argue. After that, nothing. No more calls, no more texts, no more fake apologies or desperate pleas for money. My parents vanished from my life completely. Tyler stayed silent like he never existed, and I won. For the first time in my life, I was free. No more guilt, no more manipulation, no more being treated like a walking ATM. I cut them off completely and permanently. With them gone, I could finally focus on my real family, Uncle Richard. He had been there for me when no one else was, and now it was my turn to take care of him. I made sure he never had to worry about money again. I paid off his mortgage, helped with his expenses, made sure he lived comfortably. He never expected it, but he was grateful. You don't have to do this, he told me one day. I want to, I said. You're the only family I have left, and that was the truth. Some people say revenge is pointless, that cutting off toxic family isn't winning, it's just avoiding them. But they don't understand. Winning isn't about getting even, it's about moving on. And I did. It's been 6 months since it all went down. Since the lawsuit, since they tried to ruin my life, since I made sure they would never mess with me again. Life has been good. I moved into my own place, got a better job, and I've been supporting Uncle Richard, who's really the only real family I have. Then, out of nowhere, my parents tried to contact me. First, it was a text from my mom, "We miss you, let's talk," ignored. Then my dad sent an email, all formal, as if nothing had happened, "We'd love to see you and reconnect as a family." Deleted. Even Tyler tried, "Bro, let's put all this behind us. Family is family." Blocked. No apologies, no acknowledgement of what they did. Just them pretending like they didn't spend months trying to destroy me, as if they hadn't disowned me, sued me, and tried to ruin my job. I didn't react. I didn't have to. They made their choice. Now they have to live with it.